The mansion had been silent for years. The kind of silence money builds when loneliness becomes permanent. Every marble corridor echoed with wealth but lacked warmth, until one night when a sound broke through the stillness. It was soft, almost impossible to hear, like a breath hiding from the world. The young billionaire froze in place, convinced his mind was playing tricks on him. He had everything: power, influence, luxury. But what he discovered behind a locked service door would dismantle all of it. A small orphan girl, hidden in the shadows of his own home, stared back at him with eyes far older than her age. She carried a secret no child should ever hold, a truth that would crack open wounds he thought had healed long ago. What began as confusion would turn into a reckoning that forced him to confront race, privilege, loss, and a past buried beneath success. Before this story unfolds, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Stories, so more powerful stories like this reach the world. The mansion stood on a hill overlooking a city that never noticed it anymore. Once, it had been a symbol of triumph, a black man rising beyond expectations in a society that often questions right to exist in rooms of power. Now, it felt like a monument to isolation. At just 32 years old, Marcus Hale had become one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. His name appeared in business magazines, his face on panels discussing innovation and resilience. Reporters loved his story, a boy from a segregated neighborhood who climbed his way out through discipline and brilliance. What they never talked about was what the climb cost him. Marcus lived alone. Staff came and went during the day, but at night the house emptied, leaving him surrounded by portraits of success that reflected nothing back. The rooms were vast, decorated with expensive minimalism, as if clutter might remind him of a past he had worked hard to escape. Every choice he made in designing the mansion was about control. Clean lines, silence, order. Chaos had been a luxury he couldn't afford growing up. His childhood had been shaped by systems that demanded perfection from him, while offering no forgiveness for mistakes. He learned early that being black meant being watched, measured, and doubted. He survived by outperforming everyone, by becoming untouchable. Wealth became his armor, success his shield. That night, Marcus had returned from another fundraiser, another speech about diversity that fell hollow even as applause filled the room. He loosened his tie, his footsteps echoing as he moved deeper into the mansion. That was when he heard it, a faint sound, like movement where there should have been none. At first, he dismissed it. Old houses made noises. But the sound came again, softer this time, carrying something fragile with it. He followed it down a hallway rarely used, past rooms sealed and forgotten. The mansion had been inherited, passed through generations that never expected him to own it. Some spaces still bore the weight of histories he hadn't unpacked. Behind a service door, partially hidden by a decorative panel, Marcus found what he never imagined. A small figure stood frozen, as if caught between worlds. She was a little black girl, no older than 5, dressed in clothes too thin for the season. Her curls framed her face unevenly, as though they had never known a proper comb. Her eyes held fear, but also something else, recognition. She did not cry. She did not run. She simply stood there, silent, as if she had been waiting. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. This was his house. His security was airtight, and yet here was a child, hidden within his walls. The first instinct was disbelief, followed quickly by guilt. How could he not know? How many nights had she been here, unseen, unheard? The realization gnawed at him. He had built a life around visibility, being seen, acknowledged, celebrated, while someone invisible had been surviving just feet away. He noticed signs immediately once his eyes adjusted. The faint imprint of small feet on a dusty floor. A corner where blankets had been folded carefully. An empty water bottle. This wasn't a momentary intrusion. This was a hidden existence. Marcus's chest tightened. The mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like an accusation. As he knelt to her level, memories surged. Memories of being small and afraid, of adults who looked past him, of spaces where he learned to disappear to survive. The child mirrored something inside him that he had spent decades burying. The girl finally moved, taking a small step backward, as if retreating into the shadows that had protected her. That was when Marcus understood something devastating. She wasn't just hiding from him. She had been hiding from the world. Marcus didn't call the police. The thought crossed his mind, but something stopped him. He knew too much about how systems treated black children, how quickly innocence could be reinterpreted as threat, how survival could be mistaken for guilt. Instead, he stayed where he was, grounding himself, making himself smaller in a space that had always made him feel large. The girl watched him carefully. Trust did not come naturally to her. Every movement he made was measured against an instinct sharpened by neglect. Marcus realized she had learned lessons far earlier than she should have. Lessons about danger, silence, and endurance. Over the following hours, fragments of her story emerged through gestures, through the careful way she guarded herself. She had entered the mansion weeks ago through a service entrance left unlocked during renovations. She had been living in abandoned sections, moving quietly, surviving on leftovers and what she could find. No one noticed her, because no one expected her to exist. Her name was Amani. She had no parents. Or rather, she had lost them in ways too complex and painful for her to articulate. The system had swallowed her, moved her from place to place, until she learned that disappearing was safer than being seen. The mansion, with its empty rooms and inattentive luxury, became her refuge. As Marcus listened, something inside him unraveled. He saw himself reflected in her story, not literally, but spiritually. He remembered being the kid teachers forgot about, the one whose brilliance was recognized only when it benefited someone else. He remembered how society treated his pain as invisible until it became profitable inspiration. Amani was not just an orphan. She was a casualty of neglect layered with racial indifference. Her survival was a quiet rebellion against a world that failed her repeatedly. Marcus's life began to shift around her presence. He rearranged the schedule, canceled meetings, moved through the mansion differently. For the first time, he noticed how cold the house was, how unwelcoming its grandeur felt. He started leaving lights on at night. He stocked the kitchen with foods a child might recognize, foods that spoke of comfort rather than status. But with each step toward care came a deeper reckoning. Amani carried scars that no child should bear. Not visible ones, but the kind etched into behavior and silence. She flinched at raised voices on television. She hoarded food instinctively. She slept lightly, always ready to run. Marcus began to understand the weight of responsibility. His wealth insulated him from many realities, but it had also distanced him from empathy in ways he hadn't noticed. He had given to charities, spoken at galas, funded initiatives. Yet here was a child who had slipped through every net, landing in his home by chance. The media loved Marcus for his philanthropy, but this situation terrified him. He knew that if Amani's presence became public, it would be twisted into spectacle. Questions would arise, accusations. The narrative would center him, not her. As days passed, Amani grew more comfortable, though trust remained fragile. She explored the mansion cautiously, touching objects as if confirming they were real. Marcus watched her discover small joys, a warm bath, clean clothes, sunlight through tall windows. Each moment felt like a revelation and a rebuke. The more Marcus learned, the heavier his chest became. Amani's past included foster homes where she was overlooked, shelters where she learned to stay quiet to avoid trouble, moments where hunger taught her patience. Her story wasn't unique. That was the most devastating part. Marcus found himself confronting memories he had suppressed. The fear of becoming invisible again, the pressure to represent an entire race in boardrooms, the exhaustion of constant excellence. He had escaped poverty, but not the trauma that shaped him. Amani didn't just live in his mansion. She lived inside the parts of him that he had tried to forget. The breaking point came unexpectedly, on a night when the mansion felt heavier than usual. Marcus had been reviewing reports when he heard Amani cry out in her sleep. The sound pierced him, raw and unfiltered. He rushed to her room, where she sat trembling, eyes wide, trapped between dreams and memories. She had relived something that left her shaking, breath shallow, as if the past had reached through time to reclaim her. Marcus felt helpless. No amount of money, no influence, could erase what had already been etched into her. In that moment, Amani's secret emerged, not in words, but in fragments of truth that coalesced painfully. She had been separated from her mother, during a police raid gone wrong. Her mother had been detained, then disappeared into a system that never returned her. Amani had waited, believing that silence was temporary, that someone would come back for her. No one did. The realization shattered Marcus. He had built an empire navigating systems that excluded him, yet he had benefited from structures that destroyed families like hers. He had shaken hands with officials who spoke of reform while perpetuating harm. The weight of complicity crushed him. This wasn't just about one child. This was about generations of black lives fractured by policies disguised as protection, by authority wielded without accountability. Amani was living evidence of a true society refused to face. Marcus spent that night awake, pacing the halls, confronting the illusion of neutrality. He had told himself success was enough, that his existence in elite spaces was victory. But what was victory if children like Amani were still being erased? The mansion no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a crossroads. By morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would not hide Amani. He would not allow her story to be consumed quietly. He would challenge the systems that created her pain, even if it meant exposing his own privilege, his own silence. The fear was immense. Speaking out meant scrutiny, backlash, loss. But silence was no longer an option. Amani watched him with cautious hope as he began making calls, not to publicists, but to advocates, not to politicians, but to communities. He sought accountability, not praise. He prepared himself to be uncomfortable, to be criticized, to be transformed. The climax was not loud. There were no headlines yet, no protests or press conferences. It was internal, a breaking open of a man who realized that wealth without justice was hollow. Marcus knelt beside Amani that morning, not as a savior, but as someone willing to stand with her. The mansion, once a fortress, became a place of reckoning. The days that followed reshaped everything. Marcus worked with legal teams to uncover what had happened to Amani's mother. He confronted agencies that dismissed her disappearance as administrative failure. He leveraged his resources not for image, but for truth. The process was slow and painful. Institutions resisted accountability. Doors closed. Silence pushed back. But Marcus persisted, fueled by a clarity he had never known. Amani began to heal in small, uneven steps. She learned that not every door led to abandonment, that some adults stayed, that her voice mattered, even when it shook. The mansion transformed alongside her, rooms filled with warmth, laughter, life. Marcus also changed. He stepped away from performative philanthropy and toward uncomfortable advocacy. He spoke not as a success story, but as a witness to injustice. He acknowledged his past silence, his complicity, his growth. The public response was mixed. Some praised him. Others criticized him for overstepping. But Marcus remained grounded in purpose. This was not about reputation. It was about responsibility. Eventually, answers emerged. Amani's mother had been unjustly detained, lost in a maze of bureaucracy and racial bias. The reunion was not perfect. Trauma lingered, but truth brought possibility. Amani was no longer hidden. The mansion, once silent, now echoed with meaning. It stood as a reminder that wealth could isolate or empower, that success could numb or awaken. Marcus chose awakening. This story is not rare. It is happening in countless forms, in homes and institutions across the world. Children are disappearing into systems designed without compassion. Lives are being shaped by indifference. The question is not whether injustice exists. The question is who will notice when it hides in plain sight. Thank you for listening to this powerful story. If it moved you, like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Stories, where voices too often silenced are finally heard.